I wrote an article about Pankaj last month in Forbes.com, and he said, raising capital is harder than ever, and investors need to be captivated by the underlying purpose driving your business. The purpose driving your business. Now, let's talk about his business just for a second. Nile was formed in 2018 by Patel and his partner in crime, John Chambers from Cisco, the former CEO. They've worked together for nearly 25 years. And I wanted to share something with this group because they would appreciate it. He's raised $175 million for plans to disrupt the networking industry. So I think he gets a round of applause for that. So first question, how do I get funding to grow in this climate?
So I have to admit that it's a pretty brutal market. I don't think it's any surprise. And TechCrunch, I believe, had published, and they keep on publishing stats every quarter. I think the stat is, it was Series C, which is what we raised, was down by 74% from the prior year. So it is tough, but I think one can do it with a pretty bold vision to begin with, number one. Number two, you need to have a pretty large TAM. In order to attract investors, you need a pretty large TAM. You know, it can be an incremental app or something or feature that people are going to appreciate for a while and then go away. The other thing which actually obviously worked in favor of John and I was, you know, we have been cleaning floors of the tech industry for last 45 years in my case and 50 in his case. So there is a track record that people trust what we have done and what we have achieved. And then one of the important thing I always advise is that you need to start with early customer validation as a sounding board to begin with, right? I think the days of people, especially for the young entrepreneurs, to think that you innovate and the people will come, you know, that ain't gonna happen. It comes to very few, like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, right? And everybody's not one of those guys. So I think that, and coupled with a pretty kick-ass talent that you can bring in the early days to showcase as to what you have. And then last but not the least, I think open up your aperture beyond the traditional VCs that you are used to dealing with. And, you know, bring in some strategic investors who could be potentially your customers and more. That's how I have found some success in doing what we did.
Thank you for that. So let's reflect back on Cisco. So given your experience with Cisco and growing a large-scale company, what are the challenges that these CEOs are going to face as they're growing their Cisco?
Well, these are all pretty smart people, so I'm sure that they will do it in a very, very quick timeline. At Cisco, I had an organization of over 29,000 engineers and the product management and operations people. And so we were always like counting whether I have more people than the height of Mount Everest or what, but we're pretty close. You know, we always focused on three things to begin with: customers, your own talent, and then the portfolio planning and the allocation. You know, I used to have, on an average, a budget of about $6+ billion a year. It's a lot of money, you know. And when you spend that kind of money, you know, you better produce results. Otherwise, we take it away from you. So in order to really use that wisely, how you plan your portfolio and how you're going to spend the money was obviously very critical. But the focus was a lot on customers and your own talent, because, you know, in any traditional enterprise, you're going to have somewhere between 5 to 8% attrition or something. When you have an org of almost 30,000 people, you're going to end up in hiring a few thousand new people in the company every year. That's not simple. To couple with that, actually, we used to have a 3 pivot approach to our scale, which was R&D. Number two was partners. And we had a lot of partners, tens of thousands of partners worldwide. And the last but not the least was acquisitions. And during John and my time, I was there for 20 plus, he was there for 23 plus. We acquired about 182 companies in that timeline. So it's a lot of companies. The company started as a routing company, but we got into everything. We got into switching and security, collaboration, and more. So when you are expanding your horizon and portfolio and you acquire roughly about 8 to 10 companies a year, how to integrate those companies. They come with very different cultures, very different go-to-market motion, and everything else. These are the challenges that we used to go through. And we did a half a decent job.
That's what I wanted to follow up on, because that many acquisitions, and I know you say, oh, it's the culture and we integrate and do that, but if you could give us a tip or two that you learned along the way to make it easier, because a lot of us have to grow by acquisition.
Correct. So there were a few things that we had in place. Number one, when we would acquire the company, we're looking for a company, we will make sure that our visions were aligned, number one. Number two, we rarely actually acquired the company just to grow the revenue. It was always about technology gaps that we might have and the talent. Talent was most precious to us. Actually, talent played a bigger role than the technology. One of the gut check that we used to have is that when we talk to the potential company that we are going to acquire, and if we cannot get them excited about becoming part of Cisco, we simply walk away. We didn't care. Because, we didn't want a group of people who are not going to be excited to be part of the company, right? And we are also careful about the geographical area where we are going to acquire, because we are very sensitive to the culture match. Culture was very critical, very important to us. And this is something that I have held very near and dear to my heart in my new company too.
So when you say culture, it's about your core values?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's go to Nile now. And now you need to scale Nile. What are the challenges you're facing?
So as you said, we started in October 2018. And when you start with technology base and engineering. And product management comes right with it. And then comes marketing and sales, right? So go-to-market scale is one of the toughest thing to do and one of the hardest thing to do. One of the thing that I have seen and experienced, and something for the startup founder is, once again, early on focusing on the ideal customer profile is very critical. Because if you don't get that right, you'll end up in spending a lot of cycles and burning up your cash really fast. Because I always say that, if you have a good talent, and if your first incarnation is a little bit buggy, you might go through some delay, but you will get it right. But if you don't focus on where exactly it's going to be inserted and adapted, it's a long ways away. What we are going through is about, and something I always tell my leaders is to make sure that they hire people who are smarter than them. It's easier said than done, because people are always afraid.
I think it's kind of hard to find people smarter than you.
No.
Oh, okay.
There are many of them. But to really, because people get scared to hire people who are smarter than them, right? And I learned from a CEO I worked for about 30 years ago in San Jose. And he taught me how to focus on the right talent, and he always used to say that, be careful about who you hire. He'll say, if you don't find the right person, let go, don't hire, live without it, right? And most people have a tough time They say, well, it's okay, I'll compromise, right? He used to teach us, he said, don't. Because he said, if you let one bozo be hired in the organization, before you know it, you will have a colony of bozos, right? And he was so right, and we were very careful. So I learned that. So I think having people smarter than you, the second one actually as part of this is also bringing diversity of opinions in the company, which is so critical.
If there are any Gen Z in the crowd, Bozo was a clown that was on TV when we were young. Just wanted to keep everybody up to speed there.
Thank you. And one of the startups are hard, as we all know, right? And it's like your new baby, right? And the pressure that you have to bring this new life in the universe, it's no different, right? And the one other thing that I always tell people, by the way, this is something that for a lot of startup CEOs, because I've also been on, and I'm still on board of a number of startups today, is for some of them it's very tough because they always use a calculator very quickly to make sure that what percentage of the company that they own. And my humble advice to all of those startup CEOs is that share the wealth, okay? Do not have the culture of golfers and caddies. It doesn't work, okay? I mean, be generous. I mean, you own 30, 50% of the company. What the heck are you going to do with that money anyway one day, right? So I think there are some important lessons that we are learning as we are scaling the company moving forward.
The last bonus question I wanted to ask was
Please.
about leadership. Any closing thought you have on being a leader?
So that's, by the way, everybody feels that there are a lot of criteria for leadership, and there are tons of books. But I would say the right leadership is very important, very critical. In any organization, doesn't matter whether it's a tech company or what kind of a company you have. And, being talented and intellectual always helps. It's going to take you to certain heights. But I always believe that it's the character. I think Josh mentioned this earlier. It's a character of a person which will keep you to that leadership spot, right? And this is where the legendary coach, John Wooden, used to say this, right? He says successful leadership is not about being tough or soft, being assertive or sensitive. It's about a set of attributes. And character is the first and foremost attribute to be successful. So that's where I'll leave it. Thank you.
Gen Z, John Wooden was the coach at UCLA, won championships for about 10 years. Amazing man.
Who won the most NCAA titles in basketball, by the way. So
There you go.
yes,
Thank you for doing the noble work of sharing
absolutely.
today. And thank you to everybody for the noble work that we all do. We provide the goods and services and jobs, and it's hard. It's hard. And thank you for your words. They're inspiring.
Thank you,
With
Andrew.
that, I'll give it back to Scott.
Thank you again.